Okay, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir wa tammim bil khair. Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir wa tammim bil khair. Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir wa tammim bil khair. Okay, so last week we got into a little bit, we were talking about tashri' and takween. So tashri' being the understanding of the governance of the human being. And this is what the prophets bring. So tashri'ah, you can recognize it from the word sharia. Okay, so it is the rules, the regulations, everything that is associated with the human being, the governance of the human being, purpose in life of the human being, everything as it relates to us. Takween is the cosmos. It is the system that we live in and that we function in. Okay, it's the cosmos, that system, for instance, that fire is hot. You know, I throw a rock up in the sky, the rock comes down, etc. Right? That's the cosmos. And then we talked a little bit about, you know, the with Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam, right? And both of them being together. So this week, inshallah, and we're working on certain principles. If you remember last week, we were talking about we have to make a division. We have to understand something. Anytime that we're talking about any of these aqaid, any of these points, we have to understand, are we talking about it from our perspective, or are we talking about from what the perspective that Allah Ta'ala has presented us, you know, regarding Him? Okay, you can't do both at the same time. This is where everybody gets so confused, and the waters get very muddied because they're trying to do two things at once, and it doesn't work. It can't happen. All right. So this week we're going to continue. We stopped at number 4, وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ, and there is no God other than Him. And we were talking about, like, now, what is the definition of God? And it is any what you believe to be a source of harm or benefit. That is your understanding of God. Okay. Now you can understand from this, when we covered it last week, why it is so important when we're talking about applying Aqidah. It is not the medicine that is making me, it's getting me better. It is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this yaqeen, this understanding, where I have to function in the cosmos. Okay. So I get sick. Do you take the medicine? Go ahead, take the medicine. But where's your yaqeen? Where's your iman? Where's your conviction? Where's your faith at? Is it in the medicine, or is it in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So one is the sabab, or the means. The other one is known as the asbab, the musabbib, the one who creates the means. Okay, so now when we're looking at the asbab, when we're looking at the means, then everything here that we're looking at is means. Our eyes are just a sabab, ears are a sabab, the food is a sabab, water is a sabab, the systems of the physical body itself is a sabab. It's just a means. Is it necessary? Meaning, does Allah need it? No, Allah does not need it, right? And when you think about it, when the dead body has ears, right? Can it hear? Has eyes, but can it see? Has hands, but can it grasp? Right? That essential component, in order for all of this to function and to have value, has now been removed. And once it is removed, then those, even these the physical apparatus, if you will, apparatus, right? It doesn't have any importance anymore. We do what? We bury it. It begins to decompose and decay. It smells, it stinks. Even it's a beloved family member, and still you're not going to be able to tolerate it. Okay. All right. So now, so Allah Ta'ala goes, so now we're talking about Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, and the next line, number 5 here is Qadibun bila ibtida'in da'imun bila intiha. So He is pre-existent without any origin, eternal without any end. And this opens up the discussion now, where we're going to talk about space-time. Space-time. What is space-time? Space-time, it is the parameters of the human mind. It is the boundaries for us. You can, if I tell you to think of something outside of space-time, you cannot do so. It is not possible for you and I. Think about it. Think about anything outside of space-time, because as soon as you do, what did you just do? You automatically rooted it in space-time, right? Why? Because it happened in a particular place at a particular time. So as soon as you and I think about something, even, it is automatically rooted in space-time. We cannot get around this. You can't function outside of this. All right. So we understand, if you think about it, a lot of the terminology that we're using, right? Where is a law? Well, that is a matter of what? Space. Okay, location. So now what's the problem? The problem is this, is that space, time, both space and time are the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Both space and time are the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah ta'ala cannot be bound by his creation. Allah cannot be bound by his creation. He's the one who binds his creation. It's not the other way around. All right. So now space-time is what? Space-time does not bind Allah. Neither space nor time binds Allah. So now all of those questions about where is Allah? Well, that's how you think. That's what you have to function from. Allah does not. And this is the part that you can't wrap your mind around. Why? Because your mind can't wrap around anything outside of space-time. It does not possess that capability. Okay? So now when we're talking about understanding Allah, we have a problem. We've run into an issue here. What's the issue? The issue is that if Allah Ta'ala is outside of space-time and I can only understand what's in space-time, how do I understand Allah? How do I get to know Allah? That's the problem. Okay? What's the solution? The solution is tashbih. Tashbih means like similitudes. And this is where, how do we know who Allah is? We know Allah by his asma, by his names, and by his sifat, by his attributes. Now, we say that, but at the same time, we have to understand something. Those names and attributes are not like us. So when we say, for instance, Allah is Sami'a, Allah is all hearing. That hearing of Allah is not like our hearing. In order for you and I to hear, we need what? Like we need all of this, you know, the ear and the inner ear and blah, 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 and all of this. And you need vibrations and air and all of that, right? So in order for us to be able to hear, there's a lot that is involved. That you cannot associate that with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So does Allah hear? Yes, Allah hears. Is it like our hearing? No, it is not. And the same thing for Allah's sight and Allah's speech and so on and so forth. Okay? So then the question comes is like, okay, well, how does that work? Because Allah hears, but it's not like our hearing. Yeah, exactly. Because laysa kamithlihi shay, there's no one like Allah. There's no one like Allah. So what does Allah do? Allah gives us a similitude, something that we can experience, all right, that is going to give us an understanding of hearing, not based off of how the reality as it exists with Allah, but based on what we are capable of understanding. And what are we capable of understanding? It is going to be based on and this is a huge thing right here, the human experience. This is incredibly important. It's the human experience, right? So, for instance, Allah Ta'ala, we yadullah, right? The hand of Allah. But ulama explain like you shouldn't even do this, right? The hand of Allah. Why? Because it gives an indication that Allah's hand is like my hand, but it's not. Wajhullah, the face of Allah. Well, does that mean it's like my face? No, it doesn't. But does Allah have a face? Well, yes, you know what a face is. Okay, why? Because you have one, right? You look in the mirror and that's what you see, your face. But is that the same face that, like you're talking about the face of Allah? It is not. You can understand the concept of face based off of what? The human experience. You can understand like concept of hearing and sight and hands and so on and so forth based off the human experience. It is not the divine experience, meaning it is not the experience from the perspective of Allah. And this is a very, 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 very important distinction that has to be made. So now, for instance, the question of istawa ala al-arsh, right? Allah is on the arsh. It's like you have no idea, you have not studied Aqidah at all. Like that is a very childish, because again, what you've done is you've placed Allah somewhere, which means that if Allah is in that place, he is not in other places, correct? That's how time and space both work. Okay? So now, what is the impact of this, though? This whole space-time thing? Because it's not just about the space, meaning like I can't put Allah somewhere. I can't say Allah is here and Allah is not there, or Allah is there and Allah is not here. Allah Ta'ala says, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ, and Allah is with you wherever you are. He says, رَبُّ الْمَشْرِقَيْنِ وَرَبُّ الْمَغْرِبَيْنِ. He is the Lord of the two west, and he's the Lord of the two east, and so on and so forth. Whichever way you turn, you will find the face of Allah, right? And so on and so forth. So you can't put Allah anywhere. Allah Ta'ala says that he's closer to us than our jugular vein. So where is Allah? Yeah, the question where by default is an invalid question. Why? Because as soon as you start the question with the word where, by default, you have removed Allah from that conversation. You cannot, there is no where is Allah. That's just like when is Allah. There is no when is Allah. And that's the other part. So now you start talking about time. So with you and I, we think in terms of past, present, future. All right? These are three very distinct, three different distinct things, right? But with Allah, there's no such thing as past, present, future. It's all now. With me? There's no past, present, and future. So when, for instance, when we hear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what? وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ, that he has knowledge over all things. He already knows like who's going to end up in the hellfire. You have to understand something. From Allah Ta'ala's perspective, you and I we've already reached our destinations. You understand why you can't think of everything from the perspective of Allah? Because in order to be able to do that, you need to be able to function outside of space-time. You need to be able to think outside of space-time. You can't do that. You can't do that. Okay? So this is what? It's our limitation. And it is the lack of recognizing and respecting that limitation that leads to the arrogance of the human being, and a human being wanting to try to know and understand things that are outside of space-time, and it ends up becoming destructive. Very interesting. We don't have time for it right now, but there have been quite a few quote-unquote geniuses. By the way, you have to know that the word genius comes if you look at the etymology, it comes from the word genie, jinn. Okay, so this word genius, used to think it was people affected by jinn. All right, so now these geniuses, these mathematical geniuses, if you don't know, math is a language in and of itself. It's a language. All right, you can speak with math. So they wanted to use math to either prove or disprove the existence of God. And 3 out of the 4 went insane. 3 out of the 4 went insane. They lost their minds and committed suicide.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you are talking to young Muslims in reference to Allah, I mean, we question them or correct them in telling them that Jesus Christ or whoever they believe is God is not on earth. They are not walking on earth. So if they ask you, then where is God? What would you tell them?
What would I tell them?
You know, where's the God that you worship?
So that they can understand. Well, actually, for me, I'm getting into it. So that he is everywhere and nowhere. You can't the God that we're talking about, because this is your chance to blow them away, because they've never thought about Allah correctly. So this is your chance to tell them and let them know that look, when you're talking about the creator of the universe, you have to remember that it's none of this exists without his attention. So where is he? So if my attention is someplace, you would say that I am in that place, right?
Yeah, but there's a authentic hadith for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You know, he asked the young girl, you know the hadith, he asked her, where's Allah? She said, peace sama.
Yeah.
And he said, free her, she's a believer. So I'm just trying to get some clarification because to make it simple for a layperson.
That's fine because that was the whole point of that hadith. The whole point of that hadith was it was a child with a childlike mentality. So you have to present people like either A, do you have the time to explain it? That's one question, right? Sometimes like these are bump and run type of situations, you know, you can't sit down and have a whole class over it. And then you have what is the capacity of the person to be able to understand. So if, you know, only thing they can understand is like in the heavens, okay, fine. Roll with it. Because at the end of the day, like the level of, you start talking about precision in Aqidah, like that's something that takes time, it takes effort. Like this is not something that you learn, you know, um, in a matter of weeks or months. This is stuff that you learn and you apply, and it takes years. Like this is a lifetime effort. This is actually what we're supposed to be doing with our lives. This is what you saw the Sahaba doing with their lives. Everything else was just an external manifestation of this internal effort that they were engaged in. All of them. So we have to we got to kind of like take our time with people, right? With what they can understand. And sometimes that's even with ourselves. We want to understand like kind of like everything right now, but you know, sometimes you gotta, you know, we gotta take this methodically, eat that whale one bite at a time. Inshallah. Okay, but why are we doing this? So the whole point of like when we're talking about learning Aqidah and we're going through all of this, the whole point here is to remove all doubt. So when you're coming to this class, what's the point here? This is your safe place. This is the place where you can basically ask any of these like ideological or philosophical questions, and we will tackle it right here. You don't have to worry about like I'm gonna say this and it's gonna be a statement of kufr or anything like that, right? This is not that type of thing. So this is the place where you come and like, okay, but I got a question about this. I need to understand this. I'm confused about that. This is where you come to actually get that clarification because you want to walk out of here. Like the whole point of this, by the time we finish this book, if you have any doubts or any lingering questions or anything about your iman, that is your fault. Because you'll have every opportunity here. We'll address like whatever, we'll tackle it. But the whole point here is by the time we're done with this book, you should have no doubts whatsoever. Zero, none.
Why would Allah allow somebody to be created if they were gonna decree for hellfire?
Now we'll get there. That's going to be next week, inshallah. But this is where that line. This is that question where those questions of how and why come, and that line between what we are capable of understanding and what we need to understand, and then what we can't understand, where that line is very clearly like drawn for us. Okay. Yes.
So I'm kind of was under the same line of questioning that the brother the email asked. And is you saying that we've been taught about where Allah is according to the authentic hadiths dealing with the little girl, because you just dealing with the little girl, dealing with the above his throne, above the seven heavens. We've been taught all this according to our level of comprehension, a level of comprehension. So like a rudimentary level, almost like a rudimentary level. But this is authentic hadiths. This is authentic hadiths and stuff that we've been taught according about where's the lion. Because this is a question. This is a question just like when you say you ask a question like, who is God? And this is if we're gonna try to explain our Aqidah, this is a question. Like I can't say he's what was the statement you said? Everywhere but nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere but nowhere. And I'm trying to talk to somebody and they asking me, and I'm trying to tell them that it's a creator.
Okay, so the issue comes from this, that in Islam, anytime that we have what's called a masala. All right, a masala is an issue. Literally, it's an issue. It's a question. There's something has popped up. We need an answer to it. All right. The common approach today is I came across a hadith, or I found a hadith, or something of this nature. Actually, this is not the way that we go about doing things. So the way that we go about doing it, so say for instance, this particular issue of where is Allah, all right? So now instead of just a single hadith, I got to get all of them. Instead of just an ayah of Quran, I got to get all of them. And then now, like with the collection of all the information on that subject, you can condense. You're going to derive that singular conclusion from what? From all the material, so that you have like a complete and full and robust understanding of the answer. But we don't function from a single hadith. We don't, and that's pretty much like, unless it's, I mean, there's rare occasions, but for the most part, whether you're talking about tafsir, fiqh, aqidah, etc., we don't function in any case from a single hadith. It's from the collective body of knowledge. And this is one of the big problems that we're having right now, is that the lack of understanding of the methodology of learning Islam and finding our correct answers, right, using our deen. There isn't a focus, there isn't an emphasis on it. So a lot of people don't even know that it even exists, much less like learning it, putting it into practice. They don't even know it exists. And this is, in part, is done on purpose, because once we become detached from knowledge and we don't have the ability anymore to pull the answers from our Islam, then we've become isolated, detached. And now that's when shaitan comes to get us. That's when shaitan comes. So every issue that we go over, we got to make sure that we approach it holistically. Every last one of them. Every last one of them. Got to pull the whole body of information and then process it and then understand it as a part of the whole, inshallah. The reason being is that it's ilm-based. Removing doubt is knowledge-based. And that knowledge it's intricate, it's sophisticated, it's thorough, and Allah Ta'ala gives us what we need. He gives us what's necessary. So in deen, what's not there is also a form of knowledge. So in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we see that, like, for instance, we're studying a particular thing, right? And it's like all the information just like comes to a screeching halt right here. Like we don't find anything after this about like this, or this. Well, that in and of itself is a knowledge of what? If Allah wanted you to know it, He'd have gave you some. It would have came from Quran, it would have came from Hadith, it would have came from the centuries of scholarship. It isn't there. Why? Because it's not important to you. So don't delve into those matters, which are going to end up becoming a distraction to you, because your kind of like your innate nature as a human being to be curious ends up causing you to become distracted. And then you know how we are. We'll waste all kinds of time whenever we get distracted. All right. Okay, now real quick, how much time do we got left? Okay. So this is what is known as Sifatul Azaliyah. So a Sifatul Azaliyah means that these are the eternal, or actually pre-eternal characteristics or attributes of Allah, meaning timeless. These are the timeless attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which are specifically associated with that or the very being of Allah. All right. And here they are. They're Sama', so Allah Ta'ala hears, Allah Ta'ala sees, Allah speaks, Allah is al-hayy, Allah is living. And then we have knowledge, will, this is qudra, the irada, and then this seventh one, power, is qudra. And then there's a discussion. It's a lot of semantics, but there's an eighth one, and it's known as takween or takhliq. Takween or takhliq, bringing something into being. And on a personal note, like having studied and gone through it and everything, uh, you might as well go ahead and count this as the 8th one. The argument and the discussion, it's beautiful, and it's very hard for anybody to like come like to refute it. So you might as well go ahead and call this. But this is Allah Ta'ala bringing things into being. Okay? So these are the pre-eternal sifat of Allah. They are part of the very being of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now if we go back to our text, and our text was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? Allah is pre-existent without origin, eternal without end. And you can see now where we're applying our asl, our principle here regarding space-time. Okay, so what pre-existent without origin. Do you see what I mean? So now that's a matter of what? Time and place. So it's like, no, you can't associate time and place with Allah. Eternal without end. Why? Because end is what? It's an indication of time. Before, after, these are indications of time. Now, then, these are indications of time. Here, there, these are indications of place. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be bound by his creation, period. Okay? We get similitudes. And with those similitudes, we have think of it as a genericized understanding. So we understand what sight is, but we can only understand sight from the perspective of the human experience. The same thing for hearing and so on and so forth. We can only understand it based on the human experience. Now, why is that such a big deal? Because that's what Allah wants from us, because Allah is not asking us, even though like we foolishly try to do it, Allah is not asking us to do that. Allah is not asking us to play God and pretend that you can view creation and that you can understand the universe from the perspective of God. He's not asking us to do that. He's saying that, look, understand, I need you to get to know me through the creation. Through the creation. So all of this is for what? It has one purpose. It's got one point. It's for us to interact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the point of it. Your wife, your kids, the job, the money, the daylight, the sun, like all of it, nighttime, all of it. It is all for us to interact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of it. That's the point of this whole thing. And then it all comes to an end. Then the question is, how did you interact? How did you react? With what? As you were managing, dealing with creation, including what? Including our own physical form. Including our own physical form. How did you react? How did you respond? So this human experience is exemplified how? Uswatun hasana. The best of all role models, the best of all examples. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, he says that what? Ana basharun kamithlukum. I'm a man just like you. Meaning what? He also went through the human experience. Think about it. Gets married, has kids, kids die, wife dies, orphan, right? He's going through, he had to deal with sicknesses. He had to eat food. He had to go to the bathroom, right? At one point, he was afflicted with, sihr and whatnot, right? He went through the human experience. It was the human experience. So it is this human experience, and if we actually use our Islam, okay, to go through this human experience, that's what was meant by experience Islam, meaning live your life applying Islam, experience Islam, and you will come to find out who Allah is. It's all there. It's the whole point of this exercise. The whole point of all of this is that the creator of the universe wants to get to know you individually, uniquely, specially. The only question for us is, do you want to get to know him? If you do it through Islam. It's the perfect blueprint. It's the perfect roadmap. It'll help you deal with every situation and set of circumstances that you'll find yourself in. And you'll come out not just on top, but you'll come out of it closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having learned something about yourself, about your creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that you've matured, you've grown, you're something more than what you were before. That's what Islam does. Questions, worries, problems, concerns? Yes.
So what's the technically correct and concise answer to Ain Allah?
Where's Allah? Wherever He is. Literally, that's what it is in the books. Literally, that's what's in the books. Where is Allah? Where He is. Because the ulama, they come up with this question, says, what does that have to do with your eligibility for salvation? So while the question comes, where is Allah? The better question is, where are you? And where are you going? You see what? So
do you not say Allah is above the heavens? That's not putting Him in a particular.
that's fine, but at the end of the day, like, is it accurate? No. Like, can you make it correct? Yes. Is it accurate? No.
So what would be a good answer? Because when people ask me that, giving dawah and stuff,
You guess what I'm saying? Like, you can tell them that, and that's fine, right? That's what I'm saying. It's not, you're not telling them something wrong, right? It's just that now, how do they understand that? Well, that's going to take, because I remember we were talking about last week, like, there's levels to this. There's levels of understanding, and they've got more important things to focus on, and they need to process before getting caught up in that. So, like, telling them that, Allah's, in the heavens, like, great, fine, beautiful.
That's a good answer. I mean, the Quran answered that. Because the next thing they have asked, they would say, I mean, I'm just giving experience from my own relatives and stuff, and we talk, well, how does God know this? How does God know that? And Allah clearly tells us He knows it by His knowledge. Allah, just with Musa and Harun, when He sent them to Pharaoh, He said, I hear and I see everything.
The big thing for us is to understand that there's levels, right? There's levels of understanding with different levels of clarity. And I would go so far as to say this, because Allah Ta'ala even says in the Quran, like, above everybody is somebody of more knowledge, right? I would go so far as to say this, is that I don't think there's an end. So no matter how much knowledge you have, there's somebody who knows more than you. There's something still, there's another level that you haven't hit yet. And just assume that it's there. The problem is that when we start coming to conclusions or something, and we start thinking it's the end all be all, and I just haven't encountered that really in Islam. Yeah, even when you're talking about divine singularity, like, there's levels of being able to understand that. Even though we begin with telling them what, like, Allah is one, there's a one God. It's not wrong, right? But is that the full extent of the understanding of La ilaha illallah? Not even close. Is it correct? Yes. Is it what we should tell people in the beginning? Absolutely. But for them and for us, should we start thinking, or like kind of leave ourselves to thinking that that's the end of the understanding? I think that's where the problem is. It's just that we've got to go a little bit deeper and not just stop with that initial understanding that we come across. And encourage them to do the same thing as well, without convoluting things, because we always have the same concern, right? We don't want to confuse people or present something to them that's so confusing to them that it ends up kind of like repelling them, right? We got to give them something that they can digest and they can process, they can understand, so they can move forward, all right? Nothing wrong with that at all, at all. That's part of balagha. Yes.
On the time side of things, how do we reconcile with, like, in the Quran where it says, 1 day is like 10,000 days or 50,000 days?
Yeah, so exactly.
Yawm al-Qiyamah.
Or how about this? قد أفلح من تزكى. قد أفلح, meaning it's already done. So Allah Ta'ala is using a fi'l madi. He's using a past tense verb, okay? And then with qad, the harf coming before it, meaning like this is a thing that's already taken place. So Allah Ta'ala is telling us like the ones who have like been purified, they've already succeeded. Like it's a done deal, finished. It's a wrap. So now how do you like process all of these different, and it really just comes down to is like, that's Allah Ta'ala's perspective. From us, we got to function from the cosmos, meaning that we got to flow with time. But at the same time, we recognize that it's not as normal as what people think it is. Time distortions, time perception, right? Time dilation. Now, if you've ever been like in a very highly adrenalized situation, right? Time dilations where, you know, they feel like everything is like slowed down, you know. You could be having fun and an hour, 2 hours will go by like bing, bing, you know. But you could be standing at a line at a grocery store and it's 2-3 minutes, but you felt like you've been there for 2-3 hours. You go to get on YouTube and you felt like you were on there for 30 minutes and you lost 30 months, right? All right. And so this, even our perception of time is a subject which is open for discussion. But then also we say time and understand a day and a night, as Allah Ta'ala mentions, right? The sun and the moon is for the calculation of the hours in the day and the days in the month. But that's just Earth. So when we talk about one day, that revolution, okay, that rotation that we're talking about, that's just Earth. All that math changes when you start talking about a different planet. So when we're all of this hour, minute, seconds, all of that, right? That is strictly just human-based perception from planet Earth. You step away from planet Earth, the understanding of time changes. And then you start talking about like brothers, like you want to get into it and quantum mechanics and so on and so forth. And now you start talking about gravitational effects on time and black holes and event horizons and so on and so forth. And the conversation gets really interesting. But again, it's a distraction. Because is that knowledge that we need to know? No. But it's really interesting though. On the small side, then quantum physics, same thing. It gets real interesting as far as like how things work and whatnot. But again, it's a distraction. But you can get into that whole discussion as, you know, dark matter and was that the Higgs boson? You know, it's a whole thing. But whatever. It's not for us. We want functionality. We want to learn and understand what we need to apply on a day-to-day basis as we're just tackling life and dealing with the problems and the challenges of life, the internal ones and the external ones. And then also like people come to us, you know, for help and advice, and to be able to do so like on a kind of like on a higher caliber, you know, because we always want to do the best. So if we become better, then we can provide better advice as well, inshallah. Yes, Vic.
You have made a statement dealing with about the hadith. Sometimes people just get the one hadith. But in Islam, from my understanding, and my experience in Islam, we take a hadith, we say we just take a hadith dealing with the topics, and I think that's why the brothers was still asking the question. We take a hadith and we dealing with a topic, but at the same time, it don't be that one hadith. It be the other hadiths that support the hadith that we speaking on. It be so it's other hadiths and more hadiths that sometimes it be one hadith, but it be other hadiths in Islam. Other hadiths support this hadith and keep going on and on. I think it's when people take and find one hadith to contradict all the other hadiths is when a person is like, when you say the person is looking at one hadith, it's like sometimes, and not say that person is wrong too, but I'm saying when sometimes the person takes that one hadith that contradicts all the other hadiths, that's when a person is more looking at one hadith.
Yeah, it's an assumed contradiction. If you guys would have wanted to do it, like I could do a book with you, right? And the book is literally called Differences of the Imams, okay? And the scholar did an amazing job. But what he does is that for people who don't know, who haven't like studied usul or the rules for hadith, he presents and says, look, I'm going to like lay this down for you, lay it out for you. This is what can happen with a hadith. So this will appear like and he'll give you the cases, right? This is the hadith from here. This is the hadith from there. Make it make sense. Okay? Because it's like, it don't make sense. These are two complete contradictions. This one says yes, this one says no. It don't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. And he's like, yeah, but look at this. So then he actually will walk you through that process of understanding why did it appear that there was a contradiction. And there's a variety of reasons that could come up. Okay, they will give you an indication, like whether that's the timing or who Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam was speaking to. Then you have nasikh and mansukh, like abrogation, and all of this different stuff that comes into play. All right. I tried to teach this book one time before. We got into this whole. I was with high school students and college students, and we got into this whole topic of extracting information or knowledge from hadith. So this is what happened. They wanted to have they wanted to do it and everything. Like, yeah, we'll do the class and we're gonna yeah. So I said, okay, fine. Talk to admin, got everything arranged. So now we can do the class. All right. Now expect all of y'all to show up. How many of you think showed up and for how long? Exactly. At the end of the day, people don't want to learn, is what it comes down to. And they want to function from where they're at. And that's fine as long as we do it with humility, right? If we've met that obligation as far as the amount of knowledge that we have to have. And then with humility, we recognize there's oceans beyond this, but I'm just not taking a sip. There's nothing wrong with that at all, at all. But that's where the problem lies, is that we can't ever assume that where we're at in terms of, in regards to acquiring knowledge, you're never done. There's always something more. There's always something deeper. The problem is that in the early part of the educational process, if you don't do it right, you can lose your Islam. Potentially you can lose your Islam. And that was the speech that we were given before graduation. This is after 8 years of study. And senior teacher calls us, says he wants to have a talk with us. Thinking it's the pep talk. When the pep talk basically explains to us, the only thing that you've done is that you've acquired enough knowledge to be basic Muslims. The scholar of today is not the scholar of yesterday. You just acquired enough knowledge to be a basic Muslim. That's what you've done. And you have enough knowledge now that you can go about, you can continue the educational process without hurting yourself or hurting other people. Meaning that you can engage in research, you can go and find out the answers to questions, right? And you've got the necessary foundation to do it in a safe way that you're not going to damage your understanding of your deen. And God forbid that you end up damaging somebody else's understanding of the deen. That was it. I said, that's what you've accomplished. You spent 8 years and that's what you've accomplished. You are ready to begin learning. That's what we were told. And I have found that to be 100% true. Just my own personal human experience.
What was your first thought when you said that back then?
Reality check. Because that was what we were thinking, you just spent 8 years. And that last year was 7 days a week. So you just spend all of this time trying to reach this mile marker, right, of graduating. And you're finally got my paperwork, I'm a scholar, right? Yeah, and then they, brings you in, sits you down, and basically no, you're a baby. And this knowledge thing, you've got a lot of learning to do. You got even more to put into practice, all right? And you can legitimately begin learning now if you're going to take it seriously. And some did and some didn't. You'd be surprised when you go overseas how many taxi drivers and rickshaw drivers and everything, they're actually scholars, meaning they've graduated, they have the degree, They've got certifications, and they're driving taxis and everything right now. So it's not just about acquiring the knowledge. The question is are you trying to put it into practice? And does Allah end up using you to do the khidmah of deen? Otherwise, yeah, you could go and learn it, and next thing you know, you're running a restaurant. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Okay. Yes, Grayson.
Non-functional question in regards to when we were talking about like where Allah is. So is the throne that's above the seven heavens, would that be considered spatial?
Okay, but like I want you like catch this, guys. You're doing it already. You want to know where to put Allah, and you can't. That's the whole point. If you could put him somewhere, he wouldn't be Allah anymore. If you could put him somewhere, he wouldn't be Allah anymore. If you could trap Allah in a particular time, in a particular place, he wouldn't be Allah anymore. People respond to this in two different ways. One, it's like, how do you process the fact that like there's no where? And then the others are like, great, because that's what I need Allah to be. If my human brain can wrap itself around like the entire concept of Allah, it can't be Allah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
My brain should not be able to grasp the entirety of the creator of the universe. Subhanallah, bihamdihi, subhanallah, bihamdihi, wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. You got to remember, like that's what, like you leave Earth. That would be my advice. Leave Earth. Think about like how small this planet is, even just compared to the sun.